Welcome to the Vol Bros. My name is Evan. This is my brother Rustin, and we are two Vol Bros who are actually bros in real life. And you might be wondering why we played the basketball intro for this show. It's football season. What's going on? Well, the basketball team tipped off practice this week. And so we are so fortunate. We have a very special treat for all of us tonight. The man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Chris Dortch is with us this evening. Welcome, Chris. Good to have you.
Great to be with you guys. I feel like I should drop a trivia question here. My coaching debut involved one of these gentlemen. Where was it and what was it? I'll actually give it away. When Evan was at Silverdale and Rustin taught there, they started a golf program, and my daughter went to school there, and they found out I liked golf, so I got drafted as coach. I think I'm the only coach in history that retired with a winless record.
Yeah, so that was an unfortunate set of circumstances for Coach Dortch because the level of talent he was handed in our golf team, the fact that I made the team shows the lack of talent that we had.
Oh man, we needed you.
And then I was so pumped that I actually made the team. And then in our first match of the season, we were playing at Bear Trace here in Chattanooga, and I hit the ball way over in the rough, which is where I normally spent the majority of my time. And I swung, and the rough was so thick, it grabbed the club head, and I dislocated my left shoulder in my first round of golf.
Yeah, and then we were really doomed because after that we had like one guy who had ever played, and he had only played for like 4 months. He was like a prodigy. Mitch Rossell, he's actually a country western singer now.
A huge deal.
So that was the extent of it. After you got hurt, we were pretty much toast after that.
It was, hey, that first round though, it was fun. I still remember my tee shot on the first hole because everybody's standing around watching, and Mitch was the first one to tee off, obviously, and then so I got to go second. And I was just thinking, like, man, please just hit it straight. Please just hit it straight. That's all I wanted to do. And I did, thankfully, but that was pretty much the only shot I hit straight the rest of that whole round. But good times right there. Good times.
For those of you who just heard Chris say Mitch Rossell, and you're like, wait, that Mitch Rossell? Yes, the Mitch Rossell who just finished opening for Garth Brooks.
Yeah, that's the one.
Same
person. It was amazing. Whatever that kid said, I call him a kid. I'm sure he's in his 30s now, but whatever he set his mind to do, he could do. He literally just picked up golf the summer we started our program, and he was our number one guy. He just became infatuated with it. And what's funny, back in the day, his guy musically was Tupac. And then he became this country, and he's good. I mean, I followed his career, and any second now you expect him to break out big. But I mean, playing with Garth Brooks, he's the Beatles of latter-day country music.
Absolutely. We already got some folks chiming in on the comments. Elijah, welcome, buddy. Good to have you with us. He said it's almost basketball time in Tennessee. Absolutely. Keg 2071 said, "What's up, Vol Bros? Go Big Orange." Absolutely, go Big Orange. Hypel's hype man Jeff, that's a good name. He said, "Can't wait to see what Chaz Lanier does for the Vols this season. I'm sure he will be a much talked about person this evening." And Mr. Jones said, "Sports Talk Jay played golf at Tennessee." I didn't know that. That's cool. That's another Tennessee YouTube person. And Elijah said, "I always got to play my slice, so I aim about 30 to 50 yards left of the target." There you go. Well played, sir. Well played.
Yeah, I've never done that.
And Hypel's hype man said he's pretty good at mini golf. That's what I'm talking about. Absolutely. Well, so just so everybody knows, Chris is the man when it comes to college basketball in America. And I mean that because he's probably had conversations with more head basketball coaches in college basketball than pretty much everybody else on Twitter combined. I mean, like he is the authoritative person when it comes to college basketball. And I liken it to this. You know, every year Chris writes the Blue Ribbon College Basketball Yearbook. And in my opinion, the best analogy I can give for its popularity and success, it is to college basketball what Phil Steele's college football preview magazine is to college football. Rustin, do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I was actually, I know we didn't tell you we were going to ask this, Chris, so I'm just curious, what is your distribution now?
As far as how we distribute it?
No, like how many issues of the magazine do you sell on an annual basis?
Well, we'll sell around 6,000, and what's cool about that is I was told by an author who's a friend of my son's, who works for Simon & Schuster, who writes for Simon & Schuster, one of the biggest publishers in the world. 90% of all books in print sell less than 500 copies. So I'm not Stephen King, but I'm not in that 90% either. You know, we sell enough to make it worth our while, but more importantly, we serve a kind of a niche audience. Like, if you make your living in the game, you have to buy this book. And I'm talking about coaches, NBA scouts, even the NCAA selection committee. And assistant coaches buy it to scout opponents. So you could say in sincerity that this book is used from start to finish of the college season. To start, you've got coaches using it to scout with, and to finish, you've got the NCAA selection committee using it literally to help them pick the teams that are going to be in the tournament. So to me, that's a tremendous honor. And every year I get calls from readers that, you know, just want to talk. And I enjoy that. And they'll say stuff like, oh, it's Christmas when they get their book, or,
That's awesome.
you know, now the season can finally start. And it's just a big honor, because I grew up, there was a magazine called Street and Smiths. And I would, Rustin shaking his head, he remembers that. And I would literally wait at the bookstore for that thing to come out. And it's long gone, of course. And we're kind of the granddaddy. This is our 44th printing. And
That's
for
awesome.
me to be able to publish something that is as anticipated as Street and Smiths was for me, it's just a tremendous honor. So we exist for people like me, you know, basketball junkies.
I'll say two things to that. Number one, I used to wait on Street and Smiths every year, and I'd go out and buy it. But the reason I would go out and buy it is they typically had a bunch of stuff wrong, and I would go through it and try to find all their mistakes.
Wow!
But with Blue Ribbon, my relationship with Blue Ribbon over the years has been, it is the resource for all coaches. And I'll just tell you this, Chris, and I don't know if any of my former players have ever said this to you, but I had several former players who went on to play at the Division I level, and they used to talk about one of their goals was to get their name listed in Blue Ribbon.
That's cool.
Like that, they knew they had arrived if their name got in Blue Ribbon.
That's awesome. We've had a couple of coaches this year, rookie head coaches. They told our writers, like, wow, this is my first Blue Ribbon interview. I'm stoked. You know,
oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it really is. And I never would have dreamed that my career turned this way. I always knew I wanted to be a sports writer, even, I mean, when I was 5 years old. And I always loved basketball, but I never dreamed that my career would kind of take this turn. And it's really kind of a battle of perseverance, because, you know, the publishing industry is, you know, it's dangerous unless you're Stephen King or somebody, you know, and sell millions of books. the publishing industry is dicey, and especially for us and COVID and the price of paper and stuff like that. So I have fought for this thing and sweat and bled for this thing. And I'm just glad it's as well regarded as it is. And I'm so appreciative to the people that care about it and are so supportive of us.
Well, and I'm going to brag on you for a second. Well, we've already been bragging on you, rightfully so, but we are in the presence of sports writer royalty tonight. Tennessee Sports Writers Association Hall of Famer and United States Basketball Writers Association Hall of Famer. That is incredible. So congratulations, first of all, for that.
Thank you. I'm stoked about both of those. Grantland Rice is in the Tennessee Sports Writers Hall of Fame. So for me to be in the same area code as that guy, I must have done something right, but certainly it's a thrill. And then the U.S. Basketball Writers was a dream and a hoped for goal to sort of cap the career. And I got to go to the Final Four in April and give a little speech and accept the award, and got a little choked up, and it meant a lot to me. I told a story. My father, when he was in high school, he went to a small rural school in West Tennessee. And when he was a senior, he was asked to coach the 7th grade girls. And he never thought to tell me about it. Why, I don't know. And I don't know why he was pressed into that duty. But as I said in my speech, and this is kind of what choked me up, I said, I guess I was predestined. It turns out I'm the son of a coach. And you know the cliche about the son of a coach. He's the son of a coach, so he must know how to play. So I thought that was pretty cool. That dad, my dad always wanted me to go hunting and fishing with him. And he once told me sports would never put a dime in my pocket. And literally, I kid you not, he was on his deathbed, and he and I had the talk that no father and no son ever wants to have, like, did I do right by you? Are we okay? And he said, I was really wrong about that. And I said, Dad, I forgave you for that the second you said it, because I knew that you were going to be wrong. And there was no point rubbing it in, because I was going to do what I wanted to do. He wanted me to get into computers, and looking back on it, that wouldn't have been the worst thing, because he could see it. He could see the future from where he sat. He wasn't in the Army, but he worked for the Department of the Army and worked at the Pentagon, and so he could kind of see it. But what he couldn't see, what was instilled in me when I was a kid in our neighborhood, all you had was sports. I mean, back then there were no video games. There was 3 channels on TV, and every day we would be out playing baseball, softball, football, kickball, frisbees, just all kinds of stuff. And it just hooked me from get-go. And I was always fascinated with the newspaper too. And I guess the two of those things combined got me to where I am.
That is awesome. Carl said, kudos on the accolades, Chris.
Appreciate that.
Carl, we are praying for you tonight. So Carl lives in the path of the hurricane. He's joining us from Florida. And,
oh my goodness. Good luck, Carl.
Absolutely. When it wasn't good when you're watching the Weather Channel and they're showing live shots of the city you live in. And so that's never a good sign. And so I saw Carlstown and I was like, oh, that's not good. Mr. Osborne said, Mr. Dortch, a fellow ETSU alumnus. That's cool.
Indeed.
And he said, I'm just 11 years behind him. Go Bucks. And he said, will ETSU be competitive in the Southern Conference this year? Naturally looking forward to the Vols competing for the SEC.
I do think they'll be competitive in the Southern Conference. Brooks Savage is a good friend, and he's another guy that kind of like me knew what he wanted to do when he was young. Yep. He wanted to be a coach. If I'm not mistaken, he's the son of a coach.
Yep.
And he worked for Steve Forbes, who I think is a great coach. He was an assistant, as you guys remember, at Tennessee, and now he's at Wake Forest. We just texted. No, he called me yesterday. In fact, he needed something that I could provide, and I sent it to him right away. But Brooks, he advocated for Brooks at ETSU, and if you look at what he did last year, he took a team that literally could not throw it in the ocean and got to the finals of the SoCon tournament. So he went out and got him some shooters and some legit bigs, including a kid that played at Wake Forest. So I think they're going to be okay.
So, Chris, before we got 3 questions for Chris specifically about Tennessee basketball, and some of the folks in the comments are actually asking some of the exact questions that we told him we were going to ask him. Several things about Rick Barnes. I'm going to try to get back through those comments as best I can after we ask Chris some questions. But before we do that, real quick, can you just tell everybody how they can get themselves a copy of the Blue Ribbon Yearbook?
Absolutely. You can go to blueribbonyearbook.com. It's just all one word, blueribbonyearbook.com. And you can see there, I always knew Evan was a clever dude. He figured out how to he figured out how to put my website on there. And as you can see, there's a normal, just like a regular book with a regular binding. There's the digital edition, which you can put on your iPad. And then to the far right, there's the spiral edition, which media people like because it stays open on press row. So we still got a few of those left. And we're going to start shipping out next week.
That is awesome. Thank you very much for letting people know that. Rustin, I think you got a good question for Chris to lead us off with.
So you just mentioned talking to Steve Forbes, Brooks Savage. I mean, for those watching, I hope they recognize that you do actually talk to every program in America. So you've interacted with a wide range of coaches. How would you describe Rick Barnes, and what makes him different than a lot of the other coaches that you interact with?
Well, the best way I can answer that, when I gave my acceptance speech for the U.S. Basketball and the Tennessee Basketball Writers Hall of Fame, I thanked 3 coaches. One was Sonny Smith, who started out at ETSU and later went to Auburn. One was Les Robinson, who was at ETSU and later went to NC State. And one was Rick Barnes. And I think that Rick Barnes is one of the kindest, most decent, compassionate, and caring human beings I've ever run across. I've gotten to know him very well. And I know some people were disappointed. I don't know, maybe when they thought Tennessee had a chance to hire the next young hot shot or whatever. And maybe they thought that Rick was coming for the so-called golden parachute to kind of work out his retirement years. They don't know Rick Barnes. His goal, as he tells me all the time, and even now we'll text back and forth, and I've started to capitalize this. His goal is the last Monday night. And until he gets there, I don't think he'll be satisfied. And if anybody thinks that he has been put out to pasture or put himself out to pasture, couldn't be farther from the truth. He's really tough on his players. I've seen it in person. But at the same time, I mean, I've seen him get on somebody in practice and then afterwards go up to the kid and play video games with him or spend a half hour working on his free throws. I've never known a coach who is so interested in helping his players get the most out of their ability. And a lot of times he'll do that himself. Coaches, Rustin, you probably know this better than I do, but basketball coaches are sometimes reluctant to be shot doctors, to work on a kid's shot. In other words, like if a kid comes to you and his jumper's not very good, you just kind of live with that. And but not Rick. Rick will help you become a better shooter. I'll give you an example. Dalton Connect. Everybody knows how great of a year he had. And I was talking to some of his assistants about Connect, and I'd watched a ton of tape on him. And they said, one of the assistants asked me, what do you really think of him? Do you think he can play at our level? And I said, I think he's as good as Grady Dick, who played at Kansas and was a lottery pick. And the coach was kind of surprised by that. And I said, I think he's got one issue that if I were nitpicking, I would try to fix. And I think he shoots his jump shot a little flat. So they've signed him. And in June, I came down to watch a practice, and he had been there 2 weeks, and he had already started shooting the ball above his head the way Rick coaches it already. And after the practice was over, Connect came up to me and introduced himself. And I said, dude, how long you been here? And he said, 2 weeks. And I said, you already have improved your jump shot. You're going to be a pro. And, I've been around it long enough. I wrote a column for 10 years for NBA.com, and it was centered on the draft. And he just had all the attributes. And so, but Rick and his staff turned that kid's flat jumper, which in a league like the SEC, where you've got great athletes who can close out, could get blocked. I think he had one jump shot block that I remember last year. One. And of course, you guys know what he did. He was just a force. And I think, I'm not taking any credit, but I think he was even better than Grady Dick, the kid who played for Kansas. He just carried them at times.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There were moments when he, like, you could almost watch the light bulb come on, like he was just walking out there going, "Okay, we're winning now," and there was
I'm going
nothing
to take over
to stop him.
And if you looked, you can go back on tape, and Rick would be standing on the sidelines, and he'd go like this, and that was to DK, and it meant essentially take him, And one of the best games ever, Jimmy Dykes about had a heart attack.
Yep.
They were playing Auburn, and Janai Broom. They tried everybody, so they put Janai Broom on him, and he busted a couple over top of him, and then Janai was ready for him the next time, and then he pump fakes and goes and two-hand slams it. And I don't know. I love the game so much, and to see a kid like that who was not given a D1 scholarship, had to go to JUCO, played in relative obscurity in the Big Sky Conference, and then come to the SEC and just dominate. And now he's playing with LeBron James. So, he's great.
What? Kudos to Rick Barnes and his staff for finding that talent at Northern Colorado.
And making him better, because he would be the first to tell you he did not know how to guard at an elite level. And I don't think he was quite there when he left, but he was good enough to be the 17th pick in the draft. And that's because of Rick Barnes and his staff. And as I said earlier, I think Rick is terrific. I might even be biased, actually, because in my business, you have to have an air of, you have to be neutral, but you're not human if after a while you don't become friends with the people that you work with. And Rick is just a guy that, I could tell you some things he's done for people that he doesn't want known, and it would just warm your heart. The guy is selfless and empathetic, and his players, they'll all tell you. I watched a couple of interviews the other day of two of the newcomers, and first question was like, "What's it like, working under Rick?" And they all say it's tough, but we know to listen to what he says, not how he says it. And but he says, and I said this on my podcast the other day. If a coach, if you know that a coach cares about you, you'll do anything and accept the hardest of coaching. And he gives it. And Zakai Ziegler, you asked Ziegler about Rick Barnes. they love each other. And he's notoriously hard on his point guards.
Yep.
He was hard on Zakai last year when they played NC State, and NC State would back off of him because they knew he had gotten too unselfish. So they took him aside and said, look, you need to start shooting the ball. We want you to start shooting floaters with jumpers at the elbows. And after that, nobody left him alone anymore. And that made him that much more effective. And I think he'll lead the country in assists this year. And it's because Rick took an interest in him, and he wanted to be coached hard. And it's kind of guys like Ziegler, who was really discovered at the last minute at the Peach Jam, and Dalton Connect, they're the gift that keeps on giving for Tennessee basketball, because every recruit that they're talking to now, they all say the same thing. And they may not go to Tennessee. They may ultimately go somewhere else, but they all say the same thing. If you go to Tennessee, you're going to get better.
That's what I'm talking about. Elijah said Barnes is a true man of God. He's the nicest human ever.
Yep. I would agree with that. My other two favorites, as I mentioned, are Sonny and Les Robinson. And Les is maybe the nicest person I've met ever, not just in sports. And Rick's right there. And Sonny's 87 years old, and he still supports me. And when I got in the Hall of Fame, he wrote a note on Facebook. He said, I always knew you had it in you. And the fact that he still remembers me and it just that's part of what I've really enjoyed about this job the most, is the relationships that you build and the moments that you get to see. I was a golf writer too, and seen some incredible things out there, but yeah, it beats working for a living, I'll tell you that.
Sandra said, hey guys, how y'all doing tonight? Great to have you with us, Sandras. Mississippi Vol, welcome, buddy. Good to have you. We're going to take that Dalton Connect part and transition that into my next question, because it's similar to what Hype Man asked. He said, aside from Lanier, which transfer are you most excited for? Well, here's my question.
Sure.
I may have just given away the answer. We just talked about what a success Dalton Connect was, obviously, coming out of the transfer portal. Tennessee got some serious transfers this year.
Yeah.
Really,
yeah.
I think, there's four guys that are all going to contribute majorly to this team.
No doubt.
So which transfer do you think will have the most impact on UT's season this year?
I think it'll probably be Chaz Lanier, because as incredible as it sounds, Rick said to his staff, I want you to go out and find me another Dalton Connect. So here's a cool stat. I'm going to give this away. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to give this stat away. It's in Blue Ribbon. I don't think anybody else had it. I don't care if you buy the book or not. I'm going to give it to you. This kid led the country in points per possession. He's a 43% three-point shooter. It's incredible. He had a 50, which is field goal, 43 three-point, 87% split. And he was the only person in the country to shoot at least 43% from three, with at least 3.3 makes per game. Okay, so right away,
wow,
he's got that part of the Connect thing down. But here's the coolest thing. Last year, in all the country, there were two players who had at least 20 dunks and 93s. One of them was Chaz Lanier. The other one was Dalton Connect.
How about that?
I think that's the coolest stat ever.
That is.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, from what I've learned in talking to some of their assistants, there's no question Lanier is the real deal. I went to a practice in June, and I'm 6'4", and I met him. He's taller than me, so he's got legit positional size like Connect did, and he can flat stroke it. And he came to Tennessee for a couple of reasons. He wanted to become an elite defender, and he's from Nashville. And make no mistake, Ron Slay works for the SEC network, and he's supposed to be neutral. but he was working that kid, and so were the Bone brothers. They were both working him to come to Tennessee. I think Chaz also has a friend on the Lady Vols. So Tennessee had a really good advantage and of keeping this kid at home. And I think he'll be probably the most impactful, but the one I'm going to tell you that's second will surprise you. It's Igor Milicic. And this guy, he's 6'10". He, as Rick told me for my book, he said you can run offense for him and you can run offense through him. So at 6'10", he's a great high post passer. He sees cutters. If a smaller guy has to switch off on him and he's out there, he can either he's a great jump shooter. He can either shoot it over you from 3, or he can see cutters, because if a 6'3" guy's guarding him, he's 6'10". He's an excellent defensive rebounder. He can rip it and go, and Barnes is encouraging him to do that. They were looking for a stretch 4, and I don't think Rick had any idea they would get a guy as good as this kid. His father coaches the Polish national team, for which he played this summer in the Olympic qualifying tournament. They didn't make it, but can you imagine the experience he got?
He played well, though. He stood out.
He did. And what I like about him is of his versatility. And every guy they signed out of the portal, think about this last year, guys. Every game that Tennessee lost, it had a common denominator. They would start the game missing chippies, little layups, and they'd fall 8 to 10 points behind, and then all of a sudden they'd start pressing and shooting threes. Well, every player they signed out of the portal, everyone shoots at least 58% from 2-point range. So you got guys now that are going to make layups and easy shots, and I think that's going to take pressure off of their shooting. But the other thing is 3 of the 4 can flat stroke it. So I think, even Rick's assistants won't agree with me on this. I think they might be better than last year.
I've been saying that for months, and when I look at that roster, and when I think about what's going through the minds of the other teams, I would hate to be the person who has to come up with the scouting report to try to slow them down, because you've got Milicic as a pick and pop guy at the top of the key with Zakai, so you've got to honor that. You've got an absolute banger in Felix Okpara, who is just going to demoralize people underneath.
No question.
If you shut all that down, you got Chaz Lanier, Jordan Gainey, Darlin Stone-Dubar, and Jemai Meshack flying in from the wings. I don't know how
Cameron Carr.
That.
And Cameron Carr.
Yeah,
this is a cool story. When they were playing in the Elite Eight last season, Greg Campy, the Oakland coach, came by. They were in Detroit, and he watched them practice. And afterwards, he told Rick he was most excited by 2 players. And if you think it was DK or Ziegler, you're wrong. He was most excited by Cameron Carr and Cade Phillips. And one of their assistants told me Cameron Carr is their second best shot blocker. And he's 6'6", legit 6'6". He can stroke it. He just didn't get a lot of minutes last year, but I think they're looking for him to do great things. Same with Phillips.
His wingspan's probably 6'8" or 6'10".
Yeah, and Estrella. I mean, if you look at that Purdue game last year, Estrella probably played Zach Edey better than anybody they had.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Adu was freaked out by him, and Awaka got into foul trouble. So,
do you have any idea how much weight JP gained in the offseason? Because he looks a lot bigger.
I think he's around 250.
That's crazy.
The thing about it is they've got one of the best strength and conditioning coaches in the country. And Coach G, he likes to put lean muscle on you. And I think that's what he's done with this whole bunch. But going back to what you said, Rustin, about Akpara, he actually played at Hamilton Heights. I wish I'd have gone over there to see him play. But he's so unlike Jonas Adu. Jonas, I wouldn't call him soft, but he wasn't a tough guy either.
He definitely ran from contact at times.
I mean, yeah, you could say that. But this cat, he wants to dunk everything on the offensive end, and he wants to block everything on the defensive end. He was second in the Big Ten in blocks, and he only averaged 23 and a half minutes a game. So, and again, we talk about Rick working on his shot. He had a semblance of a jump hook, but he shot it really flat, almost like he was throwing it at the rim. And within a week of working with Rick and his staff, they had him putting a little air into it, which makes it pretty much unblockable. So I think they've upgraded at the 5. It's hard to say they upgraded at DK's position, but I think Lanier will do some of the same things, with the exception of he's not going to have to score 40 points. The reason I think they'll be better, like Rustin said, is that if you score 80 and one guy gets half of them, that's not healthy.
Yeah,
agreed. Yeah,
I think they've only got 11 guys, and any coach will tell you, barring if they could be guaranteed that they would have no injuries, they'd take 9 scholarship players in a heartbeat and run with it. Because then you don't have to worry about people being mad and stuff. And you could play 9-man rotation. But seriously, Rick could play 11 guys. And I think he's okay with having 2 under the limit. And, Dubar, this guy's a 40% 3 shooter. And he had a little hitch in his shot. And within a week or two, that was gone. I mean, they just first of all, to change something, to change a shot, a player has to trust you, and he has to put in the work. And I mean, people just do what Rick asks, and they put in the work, and they realize that he's got their back. So
it doesn't hurt if Kevin Durant just randomly shows up from time to time.
It doesn't hurt. And the thing about it is, he's still a star in the league.
Oh yeah.
So all these guys know about him. He doesn't have to reach into the past. Yeah, he doesn't have to talk about somebody that maybe these younger kids don't know much about. KD is the man. All-time leading scorer in the Olympics now.
I'm not sure if Team USA wins gold if KD doesn't play the way he does.
No, I mean, KD and of course Steph went crazy those last 2 games, but yeah, I just think this is a better team all around. I think they improved from you take their portal losses and then weigh their portal gains. I think it's a net win big time.
Well, 2 things you just mentioned. Number one, if everybody else listening to this right now was excited as I was hearing you talk about Felix Akpara wanting to dunk everything on the offensive end and block everything on the defensive end, you can actually go to our YouTube channel and see our interview with him. We had him on our show, and that was a really, really, him and his family is a really cool interview. So I'll try to remember to go back and put that link directly to that video in the description of this video too. But the other thing you mentioned about Chaz Lanier averaging over 3 threes a game. I mean, if you know walking into the gym that he's going to make at least 3 threes, you're already starting the game 9-0. I mean, like you have a 9-0 lead before the tip-off even happens because you know Chaz is going to hit at least 3.
He's as dependable as it gets. He had 106 last year. That's Chris Lofton, elite level there. Chris did it his last 3 years at Tennessee. Here's another little stat. Lanier was one of 3 D1 players in the last 16 years to average at least 19 while shooting the percentages he did, 50, 43, and 87. The other two were Buddy Hield from Oklahoma and Doug McDermott from Creighton. So he's in some dudes right there.
Yep.
So this was one of the best portal acquisitions in the country. It's no wonder that BYU offered him $1.5 million NIL. Kentucky went 1.1. Tennessee, I don't know what they got him for, but it was less because he wanted to be a Vol for life.
Well, you got Tennessee Junior pumped up like me. He says it's going to be a great season. Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
So. It's going to be a tough league now. The league is tough. We picked 8 teams in our top 25, and if I hadn't have thought that people would accuse me of regional bias, I might have put the 2 Mississippi schools in there somewhere too, because they're going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
And Missouri is going to be good. It was almost embarrassing for me to pick Missouri as low as we did, but I mean, there's just so many good teams in this league now, and Texas lost a bunch, but they gained a bunch in the portal, and it's a monster of a league now, and I think the SEC, they handled conference shifting better than anybody. They went ahead, they got Texas, they got Oklahoma, and they said, okay, we're good. We're good. Maybe Clemson, maybe Florida State makes geographic sense, but we're good. And I think it's going to be monstrous. I mean, I think SEC football.
Wait, Chris, are you saying that California in the ACC doesn't make geographic sense?
I call it the All Coast Conference now.
There you go. You go.
If I were them, I'd hightail it back to the Pac-12, which is revived itself from the dead by rating some of the better programs from the Mountain West. But yeah, this is a tough league, and I think the SEC is going to be glad. This is a good year for the football playoffs to expand, because the SEC might dominate that thing.
Absolutely. A couple comments and then a really good question from Mr. Jones here. But Robert, welcome, Robert. Great to have you with us. He said Rick Barnes is a great coach and a great man.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Mr. Osborne said Les Robinson was the coach at ETSU when I was there in the mid to late 80s. Those were great Bucks teams.
They were. He wasn't there for the last one, but the team he put together won 4 straight SoCon titles and went to the NCAAs. I'll never forget, I guess it was 89. They were playing at Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma was the number 1 seeded team in that regional, and they almost beat them. Their little point guard, Mr. Jennings, fouled out on a questionable 5th foul. And boy, if he hadn't, they might have beaten Oklahoma. And if you remember, Billy Tubbs wasn't exactly the most popular coach, because they used to run up the score. And I'll never forget press row. You're supposed to be neutral. In fact, the NCAA says it in all its literature and on the back of your credential. You cannot root but I never saw that day more sports writers going like this when they thought ETSU was going to knock off Oklahoma. But yeah, Les is as good as it gets. He's right up there with Rick Barnes.
Mr. Jennings was the best point guard I ever watched in person. That dude was so underrated for his level of basketball. He could have played for anybody.
It was crazy up until they played Iowa in the last game in the NCAAs. Up until then, he was trying to become the first player to shoot 50% from 3 and 50% from the field, and he darn near did it. But yeah, he was excellent, and I think he's a coach now, which makes a lot of sense.
I just remember watching him just absolutely take over games, and there was nothing anybody could do to stop him. He was, he was
what, 5'6", 5'7"?
Yeah.
He was not afraid in the least.
So, Chris, we had a very good comment from Mr. Jones here that I want to put on the screen. I'd like your reaction to this to see what you think. He said, if Meshack has improved his shooting, he will be all SEC. What do you think about that?
I think that's an astute comment, and I do think he's improved. I watched him in the summer. They have this machine that scoops up balls, and is also it's almost like a trampoline cover, so kids won't fall off the tramp, and it makes you shoot the ball with loft. And line drive shooters are notoriously inconsistent because the ball can bounce off the back of the rim. But it's been scientifically proven that if you stand above the rim, you can drop 2 basketballs through it at one time. So the takeaway being, if you get enough loft on your shot, you can make a lot higher percentage. So I watched him after practice, not during practice, after practice, spend about an hour working on his jump shot. And I believe that if he can shoot, and actually he did this last year, he shot 36%, which is, I think, excellent. Les Robinson taught me that if you can shoot 33% from 3, it's the same as shooting 50% from 2.
Yep.
And so to me, 33% is green light territory. So,
Absolutely.
but he didn't have the confidence to take that many. If he can shoot that same amount of percentage and make about 43s, yeah, he could be all SEC, and for sure he's going to be all SEC defensive team. He takes pride in guarding people, and coaches talk all the time about, oh, so and so can guard 1 through 5. This guy could do it.
That's what I'm talking about. Another comment that came through, Elijah said, after seeing what Barnes did with Dalton Connect, how can recruits and transfers not want to come play for him?
That's a good point. I mean, a lot of that comes down to, NIL, peer pressure, maybe who you wanted to play for growing up. But if you come to Tennessee and you give them half a chance, there's a great little story about Connect. He visited, and Rick wanted to take him personally back to the airport, and they had overbooked DK's flight. So Rick sat there with him for another 6 hours until he could get another flight out. And by the time that conversation was over, Dalton Connect was going to come to Tennessee. And I think like I said earlier, he'll be the gift that keeps on giving. I think he's living proof that if you come in and you buy in, do what he says, you're going to get better, and you're going to be able to play at an elite level. And that's Rick's goal. I mean, he wants to play all caps the last Monday night, but his goal as a coach is to make everybody that comes into his orbit better than they were before they met him. And I just think I've not met many coaches that care that deeply about improving the people in his orbit. He is legit as legit gets, as sincere gets. I mean, I know that sounds like I'm on his payroll or something, but I've just been paid my whole life to judge and evaluate and tell stories about human beings. And I know a faker when I see one, and I know somebody that's the real deal. Rick Barnes is the real deal in every aspect. He talks it as much as he walks it.
So based on what you just said, let's do a comparison. Rick Barnes and Bruce Pearl.
I was afraid you'd ask me that. I'll answer it by saying this. Bruce got fired because of a minor violation that if he would have just said, oh, that's my bad. One of the managers brought the kids to my house. I didn't have the heart to kick him out. He's still there. So, but instead they had this cover up, and we've all heard the cliche that cover up is often worse than the crime. In this case, it was. But what was telling when they had a press conference announced and everything, and I guess they self-penalized, and Rick or Bruce said, "I've learned my lesson. I've learned that you always have to tell the truth." And I'm like, bro, you're like 50-something years old and you're coaching young men and you just now realize you always got to tell the truth.
And then he went and stopped doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and don't get me wrong. I think he's a great coach.
Oh, yeah.
And I was friends with him but yeah, I mean, what he got in trouble for wasn't a big deal. The big deal was trying to cover it up. And Rick Barnes isn't going to do that. I mean, there was an instance where Rick Barnes paid a little extra to one of his assistants who he thought was being underpaid out of his own pocket. That's a violation. They self-reported, and he accepted whatever it was that came his way. I don't remember what that was, but he, admitted it, accepted it, and went on. So, when I say that guy, he's as good as I've been around.
Yeah.
And as Evan said earlier, I've had the good fortune to know a lot of coaches and talk to a lot of coaches and talk basketball and other things. And Rick's as good as I've been around.
I had a ESPN 300 kid about 15 years ago that you may remember. And Bruce stood in our gym during a no contact period. And when we confronted him and said, you can't be here right now, he said, well, you can just call me a rule snob, and continued to talk to our kid.
Wow.
A month later, there were 7 secondary violations listed on ESPN, one of which was us.
Wow.
After the UT compliance office called to say, was Bruce Pearl in your gym on this day? Yes, he was.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they picked the wrong guy if they thought Rustin Pierce was going to lie for him.
It wasn't just me. It was the players' parents as well, who were totally freaked out when the NCAA called and said, was Bruce Pearl in the gym talking to your son? Yes, he was.
That's what happened when the kid, I guess it was a kid that eventually went to Ohio State.
Yeah, it was Aaron Kraft.
Yeah, exactly. Aaron Kraft. They called his parents, and it's like the dad's like, I'm not going to get in trouble with the NCAA.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, with Rick, that, there may be an inadvertent and even giving the coach a little something, that was out of the goodness of his heart, and it was inadvertent. And when he found out it was a violation, they owned up to it. So,
well, the dumbest part of it is a head coach can't give an assistant extra pay out of his own pocket. Like, why is the NCAA legislating that? Why do they care?
I couldn't agree more. I think some coaches get around that with camps.
Sure.
But yeah, it's as dumb as them not 10, 15 years ago not allowing college basketball teams to practice during the summer. I thought that was dumb.
Yep.
For many reasons, but it's really helped me to get out blue ribbon earlier, because now coaches know. But I thought that was dumb because, spring football practice, and I just think it's improved the game and allowed kids to get better. And isn't that what the NCAA wants to do? That's what all their commercials say, So, yeah, pretty dumb.
We had another good question come in here. First of all, Big Vol Daddy is here with us. Hey, welcome, Big Vol Daddy. Good to have you. Chris, just so you know, Big Vol Daddy is the OG Tennessee YouTube person.
All right.
He started a YouTube channel based on Tennessee sports in 2009.
Wow, he is the OG.
Yep, absolutely.
My man saw into the future.
He sure did. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. Elijah asked a great question here. He just so everybody knows, Tennessee is actually hosting Indiana in a charity exhibition game October 27th in Thompson Bowling Arena. I'm not going to say Food City Center, in Thompson Bowling Arena. He said, Chris, who do you think wins that game between the Vols and the Hoosiers?
That's a good question. We picked Indiana to win the Big Ten. I think because it's at home and it'll be packed, I think Tennessee wins that one. They've just made – that's the other thing that Rick's done. They sell out, and then they send their fans home happy because they win a ton of games in Thompson Bowling. So
yeah.
I was joking with one of their assistants. I said, it's about time you guys finally got to host one of these things because they played at Michigan State. And then didn't they play Gonzaga in Texas or somewhere?
Yep.
Yeah, I said, it's about time you guys got to host one of these things. So I think that'll be a great game. In fact, I'm going to that and looking forward to it.
Mike Woodson's a really good coach, but when you look at that Indiana roster, do you see a team tough enough to fight with Tennessee?
Well, they got that kid Omar Ballo from Arizona, and I'm looking forward to seeing. I think you can measure this on the Richter scale. Him and Akpar going at it.
Yep.
So we'll see what degree of toughness Ballo brings to Indiana. And that's a good question. And it remains to be seen, but they're counting on him. I know that. And we'll get to see real early on what Felix Akpara is made of. And I think a lot of people don't know this. They look at his stats and they compare him to what Adu did as a junior. Felix was just a sophomore last year. And in his last 3 games, the Buckeyes made a run in the NIT. He goes 13-6, 12-7, and 16-7. So Rick will take that.
Mm-hmm.
And average 2 blocks in that span. Rick will take that. Akpar's 824 minutes played were the second most of any player in the country with at least a 10.0 block percentage and an 11.0 offensive rebound percentage. That list included Donovan Clingan from UConn. So the guy's going to give you what you want on both ends of the floor. And I think Tennessee fans really need to be excited about that because their offensive rebounding slipped a little bit last year. And that's something that Rick Barnes' teams kind of hang their hat on. And it slipped a little bit last year. It'll pick back up this year.
So I agree totally with Mr. Osborne. He said, Mr. Dortch, your knowledge and memory is outstanding. And I totally agree. I've just been sitting here thinking, this is so much fun. Like we could just ask you questions and just listen to you for like all night if we want. I mean, this is fantastic. And he said, Keith, Mr. Jennings, he was 5'6". I was always impressed he could do what he did at that height. Absolutely.
Yeah, he was amazing. The thing about Mr. was that he never got sped up. People would try to double him to get the ball out of his hands. People would try to put a bigger defender on him, which just about anybody on the other team was a bigger defender. But he never got sped up. And then, like I said, he was pure from 3. He was also pure from the free throw line. So when I look at point guards, and I know, Rustin, you coached some good ones, if a point guard can cut down and have at least a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio and shoot in the high 80s to 90s at the free throw line, that's your boy right there.
Yep.
Because at the end of games, you can trust him to take care of the ball. And if he gets fouled, he can knock down free throws.
Absolutely.
The thing about him too, he was one of the first guards I ever saw who had no conscience about pulling up at half court. I mean,
right.
he'd take one dribble across half court and just bury it.
And Les was kind of the father. He and Rick Pitino, Les at the mid-major level and Rick Pitino at Providence at the upper major level were the first 2 coaches to really embrace the three-pointer. And I remember the year after Les left for NC State, ETSU played Arizona in Atlanta. and beat them. And in the first half, 7 ETSU players made at least 1 3. And it looked to me like Arizona had no clue what was coming. So that I said this on my podcast, I think it was 2 days ago, we taped it. A wise old coach once told me that the worst thing you can do is get inside a player's head. The best thing you can do is let him go out there and do what he's been taught. And basketball is a game of reaction. And if you try to get people to manufacture reaction, that's a recipe for failure. And that's what I like about Rick. As he's gotten older, he wants to play faster. He's told me that. He's admitted that he didn't used to really care about offense that much. But as he's gotten older, they used to scrimmage, a closed scrimmage against Davidson every year until Bob McKillop retired. And the reason is Bob McKillop was an excellent coach. Yep. They played fast, they played in space, and they shot a ton of threes. And that's why Steph Curry was such a stud there, because he was allowed to do what he does. And Rick has come around to that. And it wasn't even that long ago, a couple of years ago, he and I seem to always end up talking in March. And he'll ask me about things. And a couple of years in a row, I'd say, Coach, I think you got to have at least 4 or 5 guys that are knockdown three-point shooters. And the last couple of years, he said, you are absolutely correct. And that was kind of their mission. They wanted to find some guys that could shoot the three. They also wanted to find some guys that could make layups. As elementary as that sounds, they could go in there and make layups. Adu was getting better at that. Awaka was getting better at that, but you would not call them crafty around the basket. And now they've got a dude, like I said, that wants to dunk the ball and you every time down. And then they've got Milicic, who's a crafty around the bucket. They've got DeBar, who's crafty around the bucket. I told you that stat about Lanier, the only other guy to have 20 dunks and 93s. So if you look at tape on him, by the way, on YouTube, there's an excellent company. I don't know how they get away with this for free. I would gladly pay for it. But they put transfer portal highlights up with synergy stats. And you can go see all these kids. Just go on YouTube and put Chaz Lanier transfer portal highlights, and it'll pop up. And you'll see this guy. He does not rely on the three. And that's what's so scary about him. And like I said, he's got great positional size, long arms. Long arms, as I finally realized a couple of years ago, is just as important as hops when it comes to being an acrobatic dunker. And this guy can get up and flush it. So I'd be real excited.
That dunk he had in practice the other day that was making the rounds on Twitter, or X, the artist formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah.
That dunk, it was a lot of arms and major hops, but that was
my
impressive.
Man can get to the rim and he can stroke it. But yeah, look up that portal outfit on YouTube. They do a great job, and it really kind of helps me evaluate players before I interview coaches. And I found, and I taught sports writing at UTC and ETSU for a little bit. And I always taught my students, the more prepared you are going into an interview, the better material you'll get, because the coach knows and understands that you took enough time to understand what he's all about. And then they can't help but give you good answers to good questions. So, yeah, I don't know how I got on sidetracked on that, but I did.
And they're going to be a lot more candid if they know that you actually have some knowledge, and they're not having to dumb everything down for you.
No question, Rustin, no question. And it's really kind of cool. I've never had a bad interview with a basketball coach. in my career. And it's always because they knew, I guess because somebody's crazy enough to read every word of an 850,000 book once a year. But I think they know that I truly love ball. And
well, the
here's how
lazy,
much I love ball.
The lazy ones are building their scout off of it. They're like, I need to go to bed. I'm not watching any more film. I'll just use the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a starting point for everybody, and that to me that's high praise. I think
A
when
major compliment.
coaches, I had a couple coaches order today. One of them came through my desk, and he said, "Yeah, we can't get started without it." So high praise from a coach.
Elijah said he's been in 2 games inside Thompson Bowling, and we lost both. So
Stop going, dude.
When you think about the last
kidding.
3 years, that might have been the only 2 losses.
Yeah. No, they lost a game that I went to this year, and they were busting on me for black catting them. I think it was Kentucky, and their staff was busting on me. Don't come back.
Matt said, Matt's another Chattanooga native. He said Dortch is like an Encyclopedia Britannica of college basketball. That's exactly correct. And he actually writes the Encyclopedia Britannica for college basketball every year. And just as a reminder, I'm going to put that on the screen one more time here. Let's see. Here we go. So at blueribbonyearbook.com, and I'll even put that lower third back up there too. You too can have a copy of the Blue Ribbon College Basketball Yearbook. No joke. It is the definitive resource every year nationally for college basketball. And Chris, I cannot thank you enough for joining us.
And one other thing, he's mentioned it twice now. If you're not following it and you love college basketball, there's also the Blue Ribbon College Basketball Podcast.
Yeah. We, my partner, I consider him like a brother. It's Kevin Ingram. He's the voice of the Vanderbilt Commodores. Don't hold that against him. He's as good a dude as you'll run into, and loves ball. He's got he's even better than me when it comes to remembering scores of games and certain plays. I've seen so many that they kind of blend in. He's seen a ton too. He covered Belmont for years as their announcer, but yeah, we have a podcast, have a lot of fun, get some great guests. All the ESPN guys come on because I bribe them with a copy of Blue Ribbon. I've already given Fran Fraschilla and Seth Greenberg their copies. They act like it's Christmas Day every time they get theirs, and Jimmy Dykes can't wait, so I have to send him my SEC copy even before the book comes out, so he can start doing his homework. But he's one of the very best. I know his daughter signed a cheerleading scholarship at Tennessee, so I know what the other SEC teams are going to say now that he's biased in favor of Rick. And he's a good friend of Rick's, and they hunker down and talk religion and get serious talking about life. They're friends, but it won't affect Jimmy's call of the Tennessee games. He'll be unbiased, and Jimmy prepares like a coach because he was a coach.
Yeah. Right. That's a good point. To everybody, we got 276 people still watching. That's awesome, man. At 278, just went up across all 3 platforms. So we appreciate all y'all joining us this Thursday night. We know a lot's going on nationally right now with the weather, so we appreciate you all taking a few moments away from the Weather Channel to join us on here. And it's been an absolute privilege to have Chris with us this evening. To all the comments that I didn't get to, I apologize. We had a ton. Mina Lackey, I see you in the comments. Evan Myrick joined us. He agreed with Chris that the SEC was stacked this year. So I appreciate all y'all joining us. But Chris, I have one thing for you that we always give to our guests who join us. you are now, listen, okay, we all know you're the pinnacle of college basketball information. We get that. And we know that you are a Tennessee Sports Writers Association Hall of Famer and a United States Basketball Writers Association Hall of Famer. And that is certainly nothing to sneeze at. But you now have another title that you can add to your resume. You are now an honorary bro.
Yes.
And so
yes.
every person who joins our show, we thank them by sending them a t-shirt, a smoky gray t-shirt that says honorary bro across it, just like on the screen here. And so all of the folks who have joined us are our honorary bros, and you are now an honorary bro, sir.
Man, it's a pleasure to be part of the Pierce clan, and I will wear that t-shirt with pride. And honestly, I've had as much fun as you all, so let's do it again.
Amen. Absolutely. We would love to have you back anytime. That is.
Well, it's a long season, fellas, so don't hesitate to reach out.
Elijah just asked a really good question, and
let's squeeze that in.
I wanted to hear Chris's response to this. Who's winning the SEC this year?
Well, Elijah, I'll give you this tip. I've got Alabama preseason number 1 nationally
in the country.
And the reason is they got a guy that Akpara was second in the Big Ten in blocks. They got a guy, Clifford Omori, that was first in the Big Ten in blocks. And they needed a rim protector really badly. And they have got 6 guys who are bangers from 3. So I think this is Nate Oates' best team. This is a funny story I'll leave you with. Nate Oates and I needed 4 conversations to finish my interview with him for Blue Ribbon. He had to end the first one all of a sudden because he was giving his daughter a driving lesson, 15-year-old daughter, on the interstate. I said, bro, you better pay attention to that. But no, I think they're going to be really good. Let's see. Tennessee won down there last, right?
Yeah,
because Meshack hit a couple of big threes. So Bama has to come to your place. So I cannot wait for that. I will be there.
Well, we have thoroughly enjoyed having you join us. I'm going to do our little outro thing. And if you can just hang on just a second, I'll get your info as far as like, shirt size and dress, and I'll send it to you. But this has been awesome. This is one of my favorite shows we've ever done because we could just sit here and have fun listening to you. I mean, just the depth and level of your knowledge, and people are talking about Texas and, or Arizona or a team from the 80s. And you're like, oh yeah, so-and-so did that. And so that's incredible. It's just incredible. So Elijah said it was a fun night. He agreed. Absolutely. So all the folks, I saw Mina Likey. She's one of our regulars. She's in the comments too. We're glad y'all are with us. Chris, thank you again so much. Trust me, you have a standing invitation. You're welcome to join this anytime you want. And everybody, please go check out his podcast as well.
Thanks, guys. I enjoyed being on. Thanks for having me.
So since we started with the basketball intro, and really this show was a basketball show, I'm going to finish it with, since we are in football season, I'll finish with the football outro.
There you go. And may I give one shout out?
Absolutely.
That clip that Tennessee's Twitter, I refuse to say X, of the post-game locker room where Coach Heupel kind of got choked up and said, this game was never about me, but he said, I appreciate each and every one of you for giving me a little bit extra. And then the locker room went crazy. Man, if you're a Vol fan, you had to get pumped over that.
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, I cannot confirm nor deny that there might have been a little getting choked up watching that.
I'm not crying. You're crying.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We hope everybody has a fantastic evening. We hope all of you stay safe. Carl, we know you're in the path of it, man. Thankfully, you're not directly in the path of the eye, but we know you're close enough to it that they were showing your city on Weather Channel. So
yeah, be safe, Carl.
Absolutely. Matt, thank you so much for that super chat. Yeah, it's very kind, buddy. We really appreciate that. And he said, "Can I be an honorary bro? I'll put the work in, coach. I promise." Hey, actually, that shirt is available at thevolbros.com.
There
I'm
you
just
go.
saying, like we got a lot of really good shirts on there. So
there's merch.
That's
you guys even got merch.
That's Absolutely.
Awesome. We have a lot of it. We need people to buy it.
Hey, people can even get pickleball paddles on our merch shop. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff on there.
Wow, you guys are entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Well, we thank you all so much for joining us. As always, go Vols, and be sure to join us Sunday night at 9:00 p.m. Eastern right here on YouTube or X or Facebook, whichever platform you prefer. To the 283 people still with us across all three platforms, we appreciate you all so much. Be sure to check out Chris's podcast. It's Blue Ribbon Podcast, right? College Basketball Podcast.
Blue Ribbon College Basketball Podcast. Original name, I know.
Hey,
it's all brand
continuity. Brand continuity.
That's the key, baby.
We hope everybody has a great evening. We'll end with the football outro, and go Vols.